So today we're going to replace a Honeywell damper actuator that has gone bad. First, let me back up a little to the problem and how I diagnosed it. So about 4 years ago we had a contractor finish out our third floor attic, and he tied in the HVAC with our existing 3-ton unit, which was servicing the second floor at the time. In order to do that, they put in a Honeywell True Zone panel. That it's a HZ322 panel here, which is a circuit board that basically takes directions from the two thermostats, one on the second floor, one on the third floor, and translates that into directing the appropriate airflow to each floor, or possibly to both floors at the same time. Now, we really don't use our third floor very often, just when family or friends are visiting and staying overnight, so our third floor thermostat really stays off most of the time. A few months ago when my mom was in town to stay overnight, we noticed that the second floor got really cold in the middle of the night. Now, the thermostat was set to 72 overnight, and it was about 68 and still blowing cold air, although it wasn't really blowing very hard, but it was clearly blowing some cold air on the second floor. So I went up to the third floor, and it was pretty warm. I think the thermostat was set 73 or 74, and it was running about 77, and there was no air blowing, so clearly something was wrong there. My first inclination was that the circuit board thing was malfunctioning, so I started messing with that, only to discover how to cycle through a series of tests that actually fixed the problem, but it was only temporary. So let me show that real quick. So to test this thing, you run the mode button twice down to checkout, then you start hitting next, and you'll see it gives you a number of options to test different things. Heat, cool, fan, zone 1 damper, and effectively your brackets around open, so you can say closed, and if you go down there and actually watch it, it takes a few seconds, and we'll show that later, but it takes a few seconds to close it, so you can go back and forth. Next, zone 2 damper, and ultimately when I was testing this, I could get it to, I'd go through this cycle and give it a little more time and go a couple times, but go through this cycle once you go ahead and hit next a few times and check out, and then I guess purge override next, and now you're back to square. So cycling through that fixed the problem, but temporarily, and within 24 hours it would happen again. So the next time it happened, I went searching for the dampers. So over here is the air handler on the other side, and when I was having this problem, as soon as I opened these doors, I could feel how cold it was in this little space, tight space that is jammed in here, and so that was clearly a problem. I knew something was wrong. So if I climb up in here, and you can see it's a awfully tight space, if I crawl up in here, so you can see there's the damper to the third floor, and you can see down here there's the damper to the second floor, which you can see that one's, they're different kinds. This one has a green light on it indicating it's open. Obviously if it's closed, and when I was having this problem it was closed because the second floor was not calling for air, so it was a red light. I could see very clearly that the second floor one was closed. At the time, when the problem was happening, it wasn't obvious to me how to tell if that damper was open or closed. Later I found out that kind of around the right side of it on the back, which at this angle you can't see or really feel until you climb up in there pretty deep. But I couldn't tell if it was open. I mean, clearly it was closed because my air handler was blowing air, and neither floor, the third floor was getting no air. The second floor was getting some cold air, but not much, and it was actually not even calling for air on the second floor. So it told me that both of these were closed, while the third floor, that one should be open, and which was, so clearly that was my problem. This damper's closed when it should be open, and that was also obvious because of the cold air up in this closet space where this air handler is blowing. So with that problem identified, I got a picture of the top of the actuator where I could see the actual part number and everything, and did some research online and found another YouTube video. I've linked to it down in the comments, and it walks through how to fix this model of damper actuator. In that video, he actually describes how the actuator is powered to the closed position, and there's a spring that moves it to an open position when the power stops, when you no longer generate power to it. So that video actually walks you through how to fix a problem with the gears that are used to close it, and those gears can strip and prevent the damper from going to the closed position. My problem is really the other way around. My problem is that the damper is not opening as it should. So logically, my problem could be really one of two things. Either that panel is falsely sending power to the damper actuator, which would keep it in a closed position when it's supposed to be open, or more likely than that is when the power supply is stopped, that spring is not working to actually open up the damper. So I took the cover off and took a close look at the actuator from a side angle and found that the spring was really rubbing the gears. So I felt pretty confident that the spring was messed up. It just didn't look right to me. It looked like it was sticking on occasion. When I actually did some tests, you can see it kind of drags on it. The spring, the gears are dragging on the edge of the spring. But for whatever reason, when I cycled through the test on that panel, it would unstick and fix that problem for a bit, only to later get stuck again. So it's like when it first calls to open it and kills the power going to this actuator, the spring just wasn't strong enough to get it open. It would sometimes stick. So once I figured all this out, the next time I had that problem of it sticking, I climbed up in here and actually reached around to the back of this thing and just put some downward pressure on that lever, and that was enough to get it unstuck, and the spring took it all the way down, opening the damper all the way. So at that point, I know for sure what the problem is. I have a bad spring in the damper actuator. All of that diagnostic was the hard part. Fixing it's actually the easy part. So I went on Amazon and searched for Honeywell damper actuator and the part number, which mine was M847D1004. That returned a result for the replacement part, which was actually M847D1012. But it was clearly identified as being a replacement for mine. It was about $75 on Amazon Prime, came within 2 days. And I also saw it on eBay for a couple of different models for between $90 and $100. So first things first, I've shut off the power to the entire HVAC, killed the circuit breaker, and disconnected those wires leading directly into the actuator. That's the old one, so let's remove that. You can see in my hand is the new one, and if you effectively over on the side, on the back, that's how you're going to remove it with a 3/16 hex head tool, and just unscrew that lever there. So with that loosened up, we can literally just slide this right off. Take the old one off, and we'll pop the cover off of the front of this and take a look at both the old one and the new one side by side. Now you can see you got them side by side, effectively in the same angle. The old one, you can see what the spring's doing there. It's actually effectively come loose, and it's actually leaning up against or rubbing against the gear piece. So that's what was really causing my issue. Sometimes it worked fine. The spring would actually open it up, and sometimes it wouldn't, but it seemed to get caught. And when it would get caught, if I could give it a little pressure, the spring would give it enough pressure to actually go ahead and open up, but a lot of times I had to give it some pressure. So the new one, same angle, you can see how tight the spring is effectively against itself, and it's not creating any friction against that gear motor. So now we will slide the new one on and reach down there to the bottom and just kind of hand tighten that lever, and then get the hex head wrench and tighten that down. Okay, so we get that nice and tight, and now we'll just reconnect the wires. Okay, we are completely reconnected with the new one. We'll pop the power back on and go test some things out, make sure it's working. Okay, so we're going to test it out. We've got power back. Down there you can actually see my zone 1 damper. What we've just replaced is actually our zone 2 damper. Zone 1 damper actually has a green light, and it's much easier to see when it's open and closed, but we're going to just at least cycle through that test as well. I'm going to flip it around, and way down there is Nana, and she's going to be working on the circuit board, running through the test, cycling through the test. So for zone 1, go ahead and hit do next, move it to closed. And what we're going to see is you see the green light go off, and you see this little horseshoe. I describe it as a horseshoe with a couple of bolts on the end there, and you can see it moving clockwise. We're going to let it go most of the way, and effectively down there on the circuit board she's just moving back and forth from test open to close, so you can see it's all the way closed now. Okay, move it back to open. So you'll see it now going counterclockwise. When it gets complete, it'll settle back in on the green light there. The green light will come back on. So that's my zone 1, which is for me my second floor. Zone 2 is the third floor that we've been having the problem with. And not sure how well we'll be able to see it, but at least I'm going to reach around and grab hold of that bolt and just to make sure that it's moving. So right now it is in the down position, which is open. Okay, so for zone 2, go ahead and close it. I can feel it moving. I'm just going to slide that back there. Hopefully you can see it. Feels like it's all the way closed. Okay, go ahead and open it again. Obviously, hopefully you can see that, but obviously I can hear the spring moving the gear shift and opening it again. Okay, move it back to closed, please. So I can feel it. Hopefully you can see it, but it's very slowly moving up to the closed position. Okay, move it back to open, please. And obviously that spring's working well. I can hear it, and I certainly feel it going back down. Okay, thank you. You can go ahead and finish cycling through it. So it looks like we're back in business.